getting settled in the Zoom room. We really appreciate you all joining us today for our Marketing 101 chat with Kip Jareski-Chang. We're so excited to hear from Kip a little bit more about his career path and what he's done in the field. But first, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Cassie Petoskey. I use she or they pronouns, and I'm the director of the Waldron Student-Alumni Connections program, where our goal really is to help students, Northwestern students, explore career options through connecting with alumni. So as I mentioned, we're going to hear from Kip here in a few minutes. And then near the end of the presentation, Laura from Northwestern Career Advancement will come on and share some more specifics with you all about resources, timelines, and whatnot. And at that point, if you have questions for Kip, you can send them in through the chat tab, and Kip will be able to answer some of those near the end of the presentation via the chat tab. And so students who are, joining us today, I would encourage you all to add your class years and your pronouns to your names on Zoom, just so we know a little bit more about who we're talking to today. And also, I would encourage everyone to turn your cameras on, of course, as you're comfortable. It just makes you just a little bit more engaged in the conversation, and it helps us know who we're speaking with. So I always encourage students to turn on your camera, whether you're in your dorm room, there's a messy background, you could just get a nice Zoom background like this, but just turn your cameras on so you're fully into the conversation. So with that, Kip, I'm gonna turn it over to you to hear a little bit more about your background and your career path.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm so delighted to be here. In terms of background and being on camera, I mean, I hear what you're saying, Cassie, in terms of people wanting to be on camera, but if you're shy, that's okay too. I'm currently in New Jersey. I work in New York City, but I live in New Jersey, and I have a little closet office. Like I can reach between the walls of my space, which is why it's blurred, because you don't want to see the mess that is my office. Okay, so I'm Kip. My pronouns are he, him. I am a proud graduate of Weinberg College Arts and Sciences. I had a very kind of circuitous path in my college career. I actually didn't. So I actually applied to or it wasn't called Weinberg at the time, but I applied to CAS because when I was doing my interviews at Northwestern, the guy who interviewed said to me, "You will never get into Northwestern." So I said, "Okay." So I applied to Northwestern as thinking that I was going to be an English major. I got notice that I actually got kicked into the Medill School, so I started as a journalism major in Medill. Very quickly transferred to RTVF in School of Speech, and then ultimately transferred back to CAS, where I was in the creative writing program, and I got my bachelor's in creative writing and poetry, because of course that's a super lucrative idea to do. But I had a great time and I was very happy. Um, I spent the first part of my professional career as an editor and reporter, covering primarily technology and popular culture. I currently serve as the Chief Communications Officer at Publicis Health, which is a global healthcare, or actually, Publicis Health is part of Publicis Group, which is a global marketing communications network that's based in Paris. And I've been doing this job now for almost 8 years.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Kip, for giving us a little bit more about your background and your experience in the field. And now I'm hoping if you can define, I know it's a broad industry, but can you define the marketing industry for students who are first exploring this as an option for themselves?
So it's funny because when we were kind of going through the questions, and I was trying to think about how best to talk about, sort of this category of marketing. The way that I would describe it in sort of the broadest sense is marketing is this notion about communicating the value of a company or brand's products and services to a target audience, whether that target audience is customers or investors or clients or the general public. If you think about marketing as kind of the wider umbrella of sort of the industry, there are functional things that fall within marketing, whether that's advertising or public relations or sales. Advertising would be something like typically it's like when you're trying to communicate uh, communicate something about your product or service, usually through paid media. So think about like TV advertising or print adverts. I don't even print advertising exists anymore. Online advertising, that type of thing. I work in PR, which is public relations and communications. And so if advertising is sort of the paid side of things, I work on the earned side of things. And I would say public relations as a function has changed dramatically over the past 10, 15, 20 years, largely because of technology. Um, yeah, I guess that's it. Should I go into more about that?
Yeah, that's great. I definitely, there's a lot of different areas within the marketing industry. And I think this next question kind of touches on like the skills that you need.
Mm,
It seems like it's ever evolving because just the
yeah,
space, as you mentioned, print advertising now to digital, like an evolving space. But what are some of the skills someone might need to be successful in marketing? And then maybe you can talk about like the different
sure.
areas, because I'm thinking print is different than, some of these video components.
Yeah. Um, so I would say this is that part of what I think is interesting and exciting about a, a an industry category like marketing is that it's really, really broad. So, for example, I work in the marketing space related to healthcare. So that's mostly like pharmaceuticals or health systems or that type of thing. But the reality is there is a component of marketing in any industry that you would work into. And what I mean by that is you could be marketing for, you know, like a consumer products, right? So let's say you work in marketing for Oreos or some kind of consumer brand or automotive or financial services. There are also, you think about political communications. That's also part of marketing as well. So marketing as an industry and as a category is huge. And the reality is if you have a certain kinds of skill sets, it can be applied to virtually any industry that you can think of. But to answer your question, Cassie, about skill sets, I think that there are some unifying skill sets that are useful for people who are interested in pursuing careers in marketing. And then there are some more specialized skill sets for people who are doing certain tasks or roles within kind of the larger marketing umbrella. So I would say that also in very broad strokes, if you're thinking about the kinds of skills that you need or either skills or behaviors or habits, the two things that immediately come to mind for me are if you are somebody who is curious about stuff, doesn't matter what it is, if you have curiosity about something, if you are a critical thinker, but also if you like to tell stories. And what I mean by that is so much of when we talk about marketing, specifically when we talk about advertising and public relations, a big bulk of what that is related to storytelling, right? So it's storytelling about organizations, storytelling about companies or people. And that takes shape in lots of different ways, in lots of different outputs that are part of kind of the marketing sort of umbrella. I would say, if you're getting a little bit more specific, um, in my estimation, I think that one of the things that attracts people to marketing and advertising and PR as a career track is that it's creative in lots of different ways. And it's not just what you traditionally think of as creativity. So, I mean, in the old days, I think people conceive of creativity as being you can draw something or you can write something. And it's sort of a limited view about what creativity means in the workplace. those things still matter. If you are a really good artist, and I mean like a designer or artist, or if you're a really good writer, those are obviously great skills to have. But, we are now at a time where creativity means slightly different things. So, for example, uh, this would have never happened when I was in college, but I have to imagine now, in college, you probably either have a class or have conversations about a future role that's emerging now that's going to be much more important in the future, of something called a prompt engineer, which is for artificial intelligence and generative AI, like how to string together words to explain to an artificial intelligence what you're trying to get out of them, right? And it sounds easier than it is, because if you've ever used Bard or ChatGPT, you can't just, like, if you just type a few things, the prompt is meaningful, right? And the example that I use with my own team when I try to explain, like, how do you create a really strong, thoughtful, articulate prompt? So when I was at Northwestern, I was in the creative writing program, but specifically in poetry. And there were 8 people in my class, which, just as a side note, 8 people in my creative writing group in poetry. Seven of them went on to get masters and PhDs in poetry and are working poets today. 7 of them, except for me. I did not go into poetry. That's another story. Anyway, but what would happen was, at the beginning of the week, we would get an assignment where the assignment would basically say, you need to write a sonnet with this rhyme scheme about a pencil. And you would think that you would get eight of the same poem, but in fact, you get 8 very different perspectives on it, right? And so that's like that's like prompt engineering, right? There are different ways to articulate an idea or try to tease out an idea. And so you would think that, like, why would somebody who is a poetry major, what am I going to do to apply that to my work life? Well, I feel like I apply it to my work life every single day. So creativity, I think having some kind of creative skill, I think, is important. I think it goes without saying, is like having a good understanding of the technology and how technology changes and continues to evolve, which I mean, I think for I think for young people, you're kind of immersed in it. So it's kind of like the air. You don't think much about it. But I think having a critical perspective about what you're actually doing with technology, both as an end user and as a creator versus just as a media consumer, right? Like, what changed in the world with the God, this is going to sound so dopey, but with the advent of social media, what changed was it went from sort of these traditional media companies who were the arbiters of information, broadcasting one to many, to uh, sort of this. I'm blanking on what the word is, but basically everybody became empowered to be their own broadcaster and to be able to share information and points of view. Now, we're kind of at a weird phase in history because it also has led to all this misinformation and all this other stuff, which is its own kettle of fish. But having a point of view with technology, knowing what to do with it, and what not to do with it, I think, is important. And then I guess it kind of would go without saying, is the last thing I would say is, you obviously need to have good communication skills. So marketing is a communications function. So good verbal, written presentation. It's really this idea about how do you move from exposition to persuasion. And I think that that's a big kind of leap that happens when you're in college. When you're in high school, you do a lot of expository writing. Like, I saw this, I learned this, this is what I know. When you're in college, and then actually the reason why you're doing this in college is because you're going to be doing this in your work life, is how do you transition that into being persuasive? How do you use your communications, whether that's writing or creativity or whatever it is, to uh, tap into something that's uh, persuasive?
Yeah, that's so interesting. And Kip, a follow-up question I have about this, you mentioned, there's a lot of different industries you can do marketing in, you're in healthcare. Do you have to be an expert in healthcare to be good at marketing in healthcare?
Uh, that's a great question. And my short answer is no, you don't. And the reason why is because I don't think you need to be an expert, particularly at the beginning of your career, because nobody's an expert in anything. Um, but but I think I think that the functional components of marketing are transferable regardless of what kind of industry that you're in. So I'm just for a little bit of context. So I've been working in healthcare advertising and communications now for about 8 years. But prior to that, my entire background was in technology. So I worked for a digital design consultancy. I spent the first part of my career being an editor, covering technology. So I was much more immersed in technology. But the funny thing is, I used to say that my parents, when they were alive, had no idea. I couldn't explain to them what it is that I did. They just had no like. If you have Taiwanese parents and they're like, "Oh, are you a doctor or a lawyer or engineer?" But I'm like, "Oh, I'm a writer." What does that mean, right? Or I'm an editor, right? However, when I got my job at Publicis Health, my father, when he was alive, was a doctor. And when I was a kid, a lot of pharmaceutical reps would visit him. And so I grew up thinking that the only pens that existed had like pharmaceutical brands on it, or Post-its only had pharmaceutical brands. So when I explained to my parents, oh, I work at an advertising agency. Oh, you know that Sky Rizzy ad, my company did that, right? So then they're like, oh, I understand what you do now, right? But you don't, so expertise in a certain category is not necessarily important. What is important is a passion or an interest or a curiosity in it that will help to drive your growth and your learning, right? And so what I often say is uh, when I'm interviewing candidates, right? Interviewing candidates for a role or interviewing an intern, the question that I ask them, and it's not a trick question, but people think it is, which is I always say to them, what is it that you do as a comms person or marketing person, right? And what I mean by that is how do you want to enter into this role? Um, what is your perception of what the role is? Because I think it can be incredibly broad. And so let me be specific about it. I am a comms person, and I've always entered it as a writer and a creator and a designer. So I write, I make content, video, audio, I do design, I do Photoshop. Those are the things that excite me, and that's how I think, right? The problem is, and I don't know if this is an educational thing, but a lot of times what happens is um, when people are preparing for interviews, they'll say things like, oh, I'm a strategic thinker, or I'm a people person. And those are fine things, but those are baseline. Everybody should be a strategic thinker. And hopefully actually, I'm not a people person, just between us. I'm like, I guess people would describe me as antisocial. Okay, I'm antisocial, but I can fake it, right? So I can fake being gregarious and interested. So I guess there's a certain amount of fakery that's involved. But in any case, having wanting to be engaged in your job is incredibly important. And I guess I would just say is like, uh, if you can be specific about what it is what you're interested in, that'll help you enter into your role. And finally, what I would say about is that, and I use this example a lot, and it's so corny, but I kind of love it. And if you have never heard of it, it's exciting. If you had heard of it, you're going to think, oh, Kip Chang is totally corny. Is this in the consulting world, like in the Deloittes and the Accentures of the world, there's this notion of a T-shaped person, right? The letter T, right? And what that means is you are a person who has a very broad and generalized sense of knowledge and skills, right? So that's the straight line of the T. But then the root of the T is that you have hopefully one thing that you have a lot of depth in, right? So that in college applications, it's called your spike. What's your spike? right? What is the spike that you're bringing to the table? And I think that that's something that's really useful for any career that you're doing, but particularly in marketing. Because there are people who work in marketing. If say you're a creative director, like your spike is probably you're a really good designer or a really good writer, right? If you're an account person, maybe your spike is you're a very good strategic thinker who knows how to connect people with each other, right? So I think the T-shaped person idea is a useful thing for you to have in your mind. In that, how can you create a skill set and portfolio of interests that sort of span a very wide gamut, but then also how do you nurture and sort of do tending to one specific thing that sort of makes you stick out in a very unique way.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a great insight for students interested in marketing, interested in so many fields, right? But this is really great information, Kip, and we're going to pass it over to Laura here in just a minute. But before I do that, is there any other key information for our students who are, early in their careers at Northwestern, who are considering marketing as a potential career? What other key information might you want them to know?
So I don't know if this is the key information, but this is the information I want to share, which is this. And I shared this earlier before the call started. I just want people to know, okay, so I was a totally middling, like a remarkably middling student when I was at Northwestern. I am amazed by people who are like type A and focused and knew what they wanted to do when they were 13 and then went to college and got the internships and got the jobs they wanted. I am not that person. So the fact that I am the chief communications officer for a global healthcare advertising network is as surprising to me as it is to you. So we're in the same boat. But that said, I think part of what is forgiving about a career in advertising is you can have a very circuitous path to getting to creating something that's a career. And I think that being open to pivoting, being open to the unexpected, rather than that being a penalty, that's something that's actually has some value. So if you are the kind of person who doesn't quite know yet, and all of your friends and colleagues are like, you know, gung ho and sort of know exactly what's going, come sit at my table because I'm with you. Like I'm an adult man and I still feel that way. Like I still don't know much of the time what's going on. Marketing is forgiving in that way because you could be good at math and there's an opportunity there. You could be a data scientist, you could be an art. I mean, I spent most of my high school in the photo lab. Oh God, those don't exist anymore. In the old days before digital photography, you used to shoot on film and then you'd have to like put put paper into chemicals and all that. So I spent most of my time in like the art department, barely knowing what I was going to do. And when my college counselor's like, so what do you want to do for a job? And I'm like, I have no idea. I don't know. So advertising is a good place to go, I guess.
I love that. I love that, Kip. I love that it can be a circuitous path. It doesn't have to be a straight line, and it can allow for the creativity and the curiosity to grow in these different ways. So fun to hear you talk about it. I'm interested in careers in marketing now, Kip, after hearing this chat. But this was so fun to hear you talk a little bit more about the space and your career path and your experience at Northwestern, which I'm sure resonates with students on the call. I'm going to spotlight Laura's video now, and then Kip will hang out and hopefully field some questions. Students, if you have questions for Kip, send them either through the public or the private chat to him directly. And Laura, I'm going to spotlight your video and hear some more information from Northwestern Career Advancement.
All right, thank you so much, Kip and Cassie. I'm just going to put a quick link in the chat and then I'm going to share my screen. All right. Oops, wrong screen share. Hold on. I think that was the wrong. No, I think
That's right.
that was the right one.
Yep.
You would think after all these years that we could get this together. All right, so I'm just going to share some information that we have for you for learning more about this industry. My name is Laura Drusty, and I'm one of the career advisors at NCA. Oops. All right. So the link that I put in the chat is a link to our advertising, marketing, and PR industry page. So Kip did a great job to kind of break down the industry for us and the different areas within marketing, and really advertising and PR fall underneath kind of the umbrella of marketing. But we've created these industry pages to define these industries for you, kind of giving you a baseline knowledge of what it is, as well as some other important information, such as the skills Kip touched on, and different important knowledge to know. So check this out. We have industry pages for a variety of industries, but I, of course, wanted to highlight our advertising, marketing, and PR industry. But related to that, we have pages for arts, entertainment, journalism, and media, so many different creative fields. So one way that you might think about starting to get experience while you're at Northwestern is to join a student group. Form and function is a pretty popular one for students looking to get marketing experience, where you work specifically for clients and creating campaigns. There's Mark, which is a part of ISB. Women in Business has a marketing subgroup. So those are kind of like the marketing specific student groups, but really any student group needs help in marketing. So that's another really great way to get marketing experience, is just any student group that you're in right now. Are there events where you need to increase awareness? Are there social media channels that you could manage? Really kind of every group needs that marketing support, and that's like a really great way to kind of dip your toes in and get that experience. There's also professional associations that you can check out. And I wanted to call specific attention to the Chicago Advertising Federation, because CFA or CAF is having a college day coming up on February 9th, and NCA actually has student tickets for that. We have a limited amount, but if you are interested, you can email me and I will send you more information on that. As it relates to hiring timelines, traditionally, marketing employers tend to open up their applications in the winter and in the spring. You might see some of like the larger companies open up their applications in the fall, but really it's focused in the winter and the spring for internships and full-time. But I did want to note that when you're searching for marketing or communications jobs, especially within Handshake, please note that marketing can be both an industry, so a type of company. So for instance, the communications organization that Kip works for is a communications company itself, but also can be a job role. So for instance, you could be an intern for a nonprofit in their marketing department. So all different companies need marketing support and oftentimes have marketing departments. And so you don't want to limit your job and internship search by only focusing on marketing as an industry, but know that it can also be a job function within many different organizations. So keep that in mind. Kip touched on this, but there's so many related occupations, and that might be kind of more of the spike type roles, like art directors, copywriting, event planners, graphic designers, market researchers. So when you're exploring this field, you want to consider all your options. Think about like, why are you being drawn to marketing, advertising, or PR? What are those skills? What are those reasons why you're wanting to explore that field, and then think about like all the related occupations. At NCA, we do appointments that talk specifically about exploration. We don't just talk about resumes and cover letters. We talk a lot to students about exploring and learning about your options and figuring out your best fit. And so definitely meet with us. I'll touch on how you can do that later. The career fair is coming up next week. It's virtual on Handshake on the 31st. So be sure to check that out. But also note that only a handful of employers are recruiting at the career fair. We have so many more opportunities on Handshake for you. So, but you do want to take advantage of those that are participating in the fair because they're hiring, they're looking for Northwestern students. It's a good way to learn about opportunities, but also a good way to explore and just learn about what is out there. So keep that in mind. We have specific industry newsletters, and we have one for marketing, PR, and advertising. So in your Handshake profile, be sure that you indicate those industries of interest so that you get this newsletter. If you aren't getting it and you want to sign up and you can't figure out how to do that, just send me an email and I'm happy to help you out. As I mentioned, our appointments can be made via Handshake. We also have drop-in hours Monday through Friday from 12 till 2. Some are in person, some are virtual, depending on the day. So check that out. And I think that is all from me. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I know we are a couple minutes over. Thank you, Kip, for sharing your contact information. And it looks like you're responding to some student questions.
I can't type that fast.
I know, I'll let Cassie stall. No, but thank you everyone for joining us. So today we hope that this kind of continued to spark your interest in marketing, PR, and advertising and gave you a better feel for the industry, but know like this is just the start. It's good to continue speaking with alumni, hearing from their experiences, hearing more about what they're doing in the field. And you can always meet with us and kind of discuss where you're at, and we can help you look for opportunities as well as see if this could be a good fit for you. With that, I will turn it over to Cassie.
Awesome. Thanks, Laura. Yeah. Thank you everyone so much for joining us today. Of course, thank you, Kip, for so much great information. We hope you all have a great rest of your day and go Cats.
Thank you. Thank you, Kip.
Thank you, everybody.
Great. And Kip will hang out here for when